Today is October 25th, 2021, and I'm here with World War II veteran Bill Wellman. Can you tell me if were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, we enlisted. We quit high school.
That was 1943?
1943. I've got a license plate on my car in 1943. It's been on there ever since they started issuing personalized plates.
Okay.
And you know it. That's when I went in.
Okay, where did you start training at?
I'm in California. Our boot camp was in California.
Was it a fort you were at, or?
Well, they have a regular boot camp out there for Marine Corps, and that's right in San Diego.
How many weeks did you do that?
How many what?
How many weeks did you do training or boot camp?
I think we were there 14 weeks.
14?
Yeah.
Did you do any other training after that?
Yes, I went down to South Carolina. No, I lost it there. Once in a while I lose it.
It's okay.
A little. Yeah, I went to South Carolina. Not Spartanburg. Jacksonville is where Marine Corps had a big camp. It was also when I was down there, it was the first year that African American Marines were accepted. They weren't accepted until 1944. They were, and then when they were accepted in the Marine Corps, the only thing they would allow them to do was ammunition. That's all they would, until it just, that's the way the world was rolling in those days. And I went to a school down there that taught us about radar. When we were assigned to the 1st Marine Division, there were 12 of us, I think 12, that were all specialized in radar. And we went in with the 1st Division, first day of battle, usually, to it'd take you about a half hour, and we would set up on a high point so that we could see airplanes coming in on the radar screen, and then we could tell whether they were enemy or foe, and that was what we did.
Okay. How did you take a transport ship over to?
Yes, we did.
And how long did that take?
Well, my story is that, well, it takes longer. When we first went over, we went to the island of Kauai, and that was like, we always used that island as a rest and relaxation, they call it.
Where is this island located?
Pardon?
Where is this island located?
In the Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, okay.
Hawaii, with a K. Beautiful island.
Okay.
It's called the Garden Island.
Okay.
And we were there probably 3 different times. You'd go out to a battle thing and then come back after the battle was over and go to Kauai and wait till the next one. And that's what we did. But the first one I went to was Midway Island.
Okay.
And the battle for Midway was over with.
Yeah.
Except that every night they would send one plane over just to irritate us. And I don't know whether you ever heard of Tokyo Rose. Tokyo Rose was an American that went to Japan, and she ran a radio station just to irritate Marines, I think. And we would listen to her every night. She would play songs. She knew who was in the harbor at Midway. She called us by our 16th AA battalion. Told us what we were doing the next day. She was really an irritating person, and every night they would send one plane out to get everybody in condition to take an attack, which they had very few attacks after that.
When you were on Midway, did you meet any veterans who were at the Battle of Midway and asked them what it was like?
No, most of that was naval. That was a naval battle. And there weren't many Marines on naval ships except the big ones, like the Saratoga. There would be, on the Saratoga, there might be 12 Marines on that 800 population of the Saratoga. And it was mainly Navy there, that battle. It was a water battle. After we, I'll tell you a story about going to Midway Island. The first day out, they taught us, there were only the 12 of us, they taught us how to operate anti-aircraft guns. We didn't know how to operate it. And they taught us how in one day. The second day, we got attacked by a couple of Japanese planes. And I was what they call, on the anti-aircraft gun, a hot shell man. They'd give you great big mittens that would come up to here on both sides, and you'd catch the shell as it popped out of the anti-aircraft, and you'd throw it overboard so nobody would step on it and break an ankle. Right? And that was my duty. Well, about the second time we started to fire, somebody called my name, and I turned like this, and I caught a hot shell right here. And they took me down below, and they said the doc will be with you in a little bit. Well, the guy came in, he looked at me, and he said, he looked it over, and he said, well, that's not too bad. And he said, it'll take about 10 stitches, it looks like. And by the way, I'm not a doctor, I'm a cook. So he did a beautiful job on the eye, although I've had trouble with the eye ever since. But in fact, when he came in, he looked at it and he said, it's not going to be hard to do. It's like, although I'm not a doctor, as a cook, it's like trussing up a turkey. He says, that's what we're going to do to you. So that's what he did. And he says, you just earned the easiest Purple Heart I've ever been around. But the problem was that the ship, when it went back to Hawaii and then back to the United States, was hit and sunk on the way back, so all the records were lost on that.
Oh, wow.
So anyhow, that was my first encounter with anti-aircraft guns.
Which island were you sent to first?
Sent to first?
Yes.
Kauai.
Or the Japanese, or like...
No, they never took over the Hawaiian Islands. But that was a beautiful island. When I first got there and spent some time, we were up high, because our equipment worked better high because of the radar equipment. And I thought they were pheasants all the time, but they were wild chickens. And then when the last tornado hit years and years ago, the chickens were knocked out free, and they just left them, and that was their bird. It was a half pheasant, half chicken. Beautiful, or banny chickens. Like, I got a stuffed one in there. I'll show it to you in a little bit.
What was the first Japanese island you invaded?
The first Japanese island we invaded was, we went to Tinnian. Again, Tinnian is where the big airplanes were, the B-52s, and that's where the bomber of the Doolittle people came out of. Tinnian, Saipan. That's we went to that island. And the last one we went to was in 1945. We went to Easter morning. We went in on Okinawa. That was the toughest one we had, period.
Did you take, what kind of ship did you get to Okinawa on?
Pardon?
What kind of ship did you take to get to Okinawa? Was it an LST?
It was like a what do they call them? They can handle some tanks. It was a pretty good sized ship.
An LST?
And we went in on the first day at Okinawa. The first day we had service aboard our ship with our chaplain, and as we got into the landing craft, that's the ones you see all the time, that was the end of it going down.
Yes.
Those are, by the way, made in New Orleans. That company is still there, and I always thought that they were metal, the ship, but it was, the only thing metal on it was the big gates. Everything else was wood in the landing craft in those days. So they were very easy to sink if they hit them. But we saw, does Ernie Pyle ring a bell with you?
Ernie Pyle? Oh yeah.
Okay, well Ernie Pyle we saw Easter morning in Okinawa. There's a big story in there about Ernie Pyle. Also about his he has a museum, and it tells about where it is down on the state line of Indiana and Illinois. And I went down there to see it after the war was over. Wasn't much there in the town, but Ernie Pyle was the hero of Marines, because he told stories like we like to hear. Like if you were having trouble with the fleas, he said, just don't wash your socks for a month, you will have no more problem with the fleas. And he talked like he was in with us, you know, and he was a friend. And of course, when he got killed, it was very emotional, because in a 16-day period, Ernie Pyle was killed, and our president died, Franklin Roosevelt. That was very emotional for us, because he was, as I tell people, if someone would have asked me, was he a Republican or a Democrat, I couldn't have answered, nor could very few people, because politics was not, the president was the president, and that was President Roosevelt was a hero of ours.
Crazy story I heard about Ernie Pyle. I met a guy who actually saw him get shot.
Is that
right in front of him?
Who, Ernie Pyle?
Yeah, one of the guys I've interviewed, he saw Ernie Pyle get shot right in front of him.
It was on a little island. There's some things in the other room I'd like to show you. I'm not sure I should let you in that room though. Anyhow, I used to write letters. I wrote one to President George Bush Sr. He was my age. He went to college and he played baseball like I did when I went to college. And there's a lot of baseball in here. As you'll see, my brother is in there with stories. He had just died 2 months ago. He would have been 100 if he'd have lived to July 30th. But he had 4 World Series rings when he was with the Dodgers. He was with them almost 60 years. He did everything for them. He went to spring training with Jackie Robinson 4 years in a row. He was, there's stories, a lot of stories about the Dodgers in here. Tommy Lasorda used to come to Valparaiso. He was here for my dad's funeral. It's a close-knit organization when you're a Dodger Blue. That's what they say, you bleed. You don't bleed blood, you red, you do Roger Blue.
When you were on Okinawa, were you sent to the front lines at all?
We were the first one off the ship with that radar unit. First wave, we went in. When Okinawa, we didn't get any opposition at all for the first 11 miles. And after that, we did.
What beach did you land on? Was it, or?
I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it was the one where you could take in tanks, and we went in, we didn't get anything until the next day. After we were in about 11 miles is when we got opposition, and that's when we lost one of our first ones. There's a story about him in there. His name was Crook John, and he, all through the time that I knew him in camp and boot camp and everything, he always would avoid wearing his helmet. He didn't wear it. And he was told to wear it all the time. And he walked into a cave without a helmet on. And when he turned to get out of there, you knew he was in trouble. He got shot right in the head, and we got him out. There's a whole story about about that was the first one we lost. All of the people that the 12 I talked about, they're all gone. I'm the only one left. I just had my 97th birthday in June, and it was I tell people the most exciting thing about my last birthday, I passed the driver's test. My kids think I bribed somebody because my eyes are not good at all. But I don't drive much, and I even plan my streets I take. So I take the off streets. And I haven't done any wrecks yet. So,
what battle were you first a part of when you were on Okinawa?
what battle?
Yeah, there were battle.
Well, we were when I after so about the sometime in the latter part of June, we were on the outskirts of Naha, which is the capital of Okinawa. I got tapped on the shoulder by a captain, and he said, I was a staff sergeant, and he said, Sergeant Wellman, and I said, yes, and he said, I got orders to pick you up and put you aboard a hospital ship tonight, and you're going home. And I had no idea why. And later on, I had malaria in the early stages, and it was on my record of having it, but I never really cured it. So they were getting me out of there and getting me away from getting it cured. And that night in June, right outside the outskirts of Naha, I was put aboard a hospital ship, and I was going home. And I didn't ask too many questions in those days about why or when. When all he told me was going home, that was what I wanted to hear.
What regiment were you a part of?
We were completely by ourselves. We were always associated with the 1st Division, but we were independent because we didn't even have an officer. We had, all 12 of us were non-commissioned officers, but nobody, the only thing we got whenever we were on a Kauai or Midway or wherever, we had an inspection every other week if there was nothing going on, and we were pretty much on our own, independent, because we did this unit of finding these airplanes, and it was, I think it was way behind the times, because when the first night of Okinawa, this is the first time they used kamikaze pilots, and we sat there in the hills of Naha and watched it like a show, like you were watching the fireworks in Chicago. It was a lot of fireworks. And we were always, when we were on Midway, we were associated with the 16th A Battalion. When we went to Tinnian, we were associated with the 1st Division. And that's when we stayed, and when we went into Okinawa, we were with the 1st Division.
Okay.
It was called the 3rd Amphibious Force. There were something like 1,500 ships in the harbor of Naha, so there was a lot of good targets for the kamikaze pilots to hit.
Did the 1st Marine Division go to Sugarloaf Hill?
Go where?
Sugarloaf Hill, I think that's what it's...
Yeah, but we didn't. We were connected with we were associated, but we were, everybody in the Marine Corps is, you're in the infantry no matter what you think you're in, because that's what you're basically trained for. But we were specialized, we were always by ourselves. We were, even on Okinawa, we would look for a good place to make a camp. We took they have these shrines where they would, it was nice and dry, and it was stone walls, all 3 sides of it, and it was like cemeteries or just shrines, I'd say. And that's where there's a story in there about, on Tinnian, I think it was, we found out that the Army had a supply center that certain nights of the week they didn't guard. And as Marines, we broke in there one night and we stole, from the Army we stole half of a side of beef, And we had electricity all the time. Wherever we went, we had electricity because we had the generator to operate that radar unit. So we even had refrigeration. When we on the island of Kauai, we had refrigeration. When we stole this beef, we had our own walk-in icebox. But we had to eat it within 2 weeks, or the inspector would give us hell for stealing from the Army, which the Army didn't like at all.
What was it like being on Okinawa when the invasion happened?
Yeah, that was one of those deals that I said in the book that I remembered almost every word that the chaplain said before we went into Okinawa. Normally I don't pay much attention to what they say, but that one I did.
Just trim. All that time is trim.
One was my neighbor, I guess.
So, look.
Mr. Hyde. They heard my stories.
No. Did you see action on Tinnian too?
Yes.
What was that like?
That was a little different because it was such a naval, such an airport for the big planes. It was not like Okinawa was at all, where it was. I went down to. Have you ever been to New Orleans, the World War II Museum?
No, I haven't.
Oh, if you ever get a chance, go.
I might be going actually next year.
That is, I was one of the original I gave money to that museum. We had lunch with Tom Hanks. He was one of the guys that raised money for it. He and the what's the big movie? Hanks and
Spielberg?
Yeah, and they put together a film. It was 38 minutes long. It's called. I lost it. But the theater is one of those special theaters. There's when it shows it's 38 minutes of all of World War packed into one. And when the show the Battle of the Bulge and it's snowing, it snows in the theater. And when you can hear the tanks moving, your seat vibrates with the tanks. It's really worthwhile to see.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the museum takes up about probably 8 city blocks in New Orleans now, and it's huge. And I'm going to show you some. I got to take you to my apartment and show you some things. Oh, let me tell you what it is first. I told you about President Bush.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got a letter from him. When you remember, he jumped out of an airplane on his 90th birthday. You remember?
I don't.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, I know he did, but
And a Navy SEAL was the guy that hung on to him as he was coming down, and at the same time I was writing him this letter because he was my age, and he got picked up right near Iwo Jima. And the Japanese were going to pick him up, but the Americans picked him up first. So when I wrote him the letter, I told him that I was getting married, and I was going to be 90. So when he wrote me back, I show you the letter in here from him. He wrote me back, and he said, I said, don't you think it was a little crazy that you're jumping out of an airplane at 90? He says, yeah, I do, but don't you think it's a little crazy you getting married at 90? That's what he said in the letter.
well, where were you when Pearl Harbor happened?
Well, I was still in high school, and I had to look it up on the map, and nobody knew where it was.
But how did you feel about it when you heard about it?
Pardon?
How did you feel about it when you first
Oh,
heard about it?
see, in those days, emotion, patriotism was very strong. I've never seen it that strong since then. It's getting closer sometimes, but it just seems like politics steps in and takes over. I told you there were 5 of us jumped on a Greyhound bus and went down in Indianapolis, and they're all gone. Mm-hmm. Those other 4, we all went in the Marine Corps at the same time, and within a year and a half, and the other guys are gone. They're all dead. I go to the high school once in a while and give us a special talk on my Taps of America thing, and we always have the trumpet player there who plays taps right near the end, it's a very emotional song. It belongs to you and I. It's eminent domain, and we've had some great stories on. We sold about 32 units, it seems like, and we're going to. The material to put together is not. I can't get it anymore. I have to get somebody, an engineer, to design it again so we can get back in business with it, because everybody likes to hear it. Taps of America.
I'll definitely check that out on Facebook.
Pardon?
I said I'll definitely check that out on Facebook, the Taps.
Let's take a quick look again here.
Well, did you ever think of you were going to go to Iwo Jima at all, or no?
Yeah, okay, I got a story on that one too. When we went to Midway, and we were only there, they wouldn't let you stay there very long because you'd go wacko, because there's nothing there. I mean, there's Goonie birds, and which is an albatross, and I remember one of the Seabees aboard the ship telling me about this bird that flew backwards, and I said, sure, you know. When a sailor telling a Marine again, another one of those stories. But there was a bird that had 2 red tails, and when it was flying, it would put the tails underneath it, and it would coast backwards is what it would. It was a beautiful bird. And then the Goonie bird, is albatross, is a huge bird. They were a danger to the airplanes. They were so big. But we were not, one of the things we were told not to do was don't cook the eggs. Don't try to cook an egg dinner. And of course, you tell a Marine not to cook something, and you're going to try it, and it was terrible because the only thing they eat are fish, and so it was a fishy egg. Well, you just asked me something. Okay. When we were going to go, they never tell you where you're going to go until you get out of the harbor. The old line of loose lips, sink ships, you know. We knew we were going to go someplace, we didn't know where. We had our gear down in the harbor, and the night before we were to go, there were 3 ships in the harbor that were blown up in Pearl Harbor. All 3, and that's the ones that we were to go on. We didn't know until we got aboard ship again. They don't tell you where you're going. If we would have not been blown up, those 3 ships were going to Iwo Jima, and that was the worst of all places you'd want to go. So, because those ships were blown up, we didn't lose. Our equipment was all in the harbor, ready to go aboard those ships, and they got blown up, all 3 of them. So then the next thing we knew, we were aboard another ship that carried tanks again, and that was when we were headed towards Okinawa. That was the last one. That was my last one. And it took me 30 some days to go from Okinawa to San Diego home. It took me that long to get, because of the slowness of the hospital ship stopping with we'd already buried our people, but there were still a lot of young Marines that were, and we looked like prisoners of war. Our clothes were what we had, that was all we, and they wouldn't issue us anything until we got down to San Diego again. We came in at San Francisco and rode a civilian train. Tell you one story about my mother. When I came under the bridge in San Francisco, home, the first thing a guy would do was call home. I called my home, got my mother, and she said, I said, Mom, you're gonna have to talk a little louder, I can't hear you. Well, she started to cry and I couldn't understand why. Next thing I know, my dad was on there and he said, did you lose an ear? And I said, no, I didn't lose an ear. I said, why? And he said, well, the story here in town is that you lost an ear. And there was a sergeant from the Army that I met on Tinnian, and he somehow hooked it up with a sergeant that had been with me that did lose an ear, and my name got involved. So my mother, when I said, you'll have to talk a little louder, she started to cry because she's not sure I lost an ear. My dad got on the phone and said, asked, no, I didn't lose an ear. And I said, that's a bad story. And so I came home with all parts. Good shape.
Oh, that's good. Well, all right. I really appreciate you taking the time for me to do this.
Okay.